The huge metal building floated in space like a giant crystal floating in black water, the galactic predator. Academy was the most famous school in the entire galaxy, where young creatures from hundreds of different worlds came to learn how to hunt and survive. The building was so big that it had its own gravity and air inside, making it feel like being on a real planet inside. The main classroom, Professor Vexstar, stood tall and scary in front of his students. He was a giant lizard creature with green scales that changed colors when he felt different emotions. His yellow eyes looked like they could see right through anyone, and his sharp teeth were longer than a human's fingers. When he was happy, his scales turned bright blue, but when he was angry, they turned deep red. The classroom was full of young predators from all over the galaxy. In the front row sat 3 Wolf-like creatures called Canari. They had thick fur and sharp claws, and they always sat together because they were pack hunters. Their leader was a female named Karu, who had scars on her face from many battles. She was proud and strong and never backed down from a fight. Behind the Canari sat the bird creatures called Screeth. They had beautiful feathers that sparkled in the light and wings that could carry them faster than any spaceship. Their eyes were sharp and they could see tiny movements from very far away. One of them, named Senna, kept turning her head from side to side, watching everything in the room. Near the back were the insect creatures called Mantari. They looked like giant praying mantises, but they were smart and could think just like humans. Their 4 arms moved so fast that sometimes other students could not even see them move. They talked to each other by making special smells that only they could understand, but in the very back corner sat someone who looked very different from everyone else. Lee Dong-wook was a human, and he was the only one of his kind in the entire school. He had black hair and dark eyes, and he was much smaller than most of the other students. His skin was soft, and he had no claws or fangs or special powers that the other students could see. Humans had only been discovered 5 years ago, when galactic explorers found Earth, a small blue planet in a quiet part of space. Most people in the galaxy thought humans were weak and not very good at hunting. They had been given a level 3 ranking, which meant they were considered basic predators who could only hunt by never giving up. Professor Vexstar walked to the front of the class and pressed a button on his desk. A huge holographic picture appeared in the air, showing a pyramid with different levels. The pyramid glowed with blue light and had words written in the common galactic language. Today we will learn about the universal predator classification system, the professor said in his deep voice. This system ranks every predator species in the galaxy from the weakest to the strongest. It tells us who are the best hunters and who are just trying to survive. The students all looked at the pyramid with interest. They could see their own species names written at different levels. The pyramid had 10 levels, and each level showed how good a species was at hunting. At the very top of the pyramid were the void hunters. These were legendary creatures that most people thought were just stories. They were supposed to be so powerful that they could hunt in the empty space between stars without any air or food. Some people said they could eat starlight itself, but no one had ever seen one. Below the void hunters were the apex stalkers. These were the most feared predators in the galaxy. They were so good at hunting that they could take down prey much bigger than themselves. They were smart and fast and never missed their target. The next level down showed the prime hunters. These were species that ruled their home planets and had no natural enemies. They were the kings and queens of their worlds, and nothing could challenge them. As Professor Vexstar explained each level, the students felt proud or disappointed depending on where their species was ranked. The Canari were ranked as level 7 pack dominance, which meant they were very good at hunting together. The Screeth were level 6 sky sovereigns because they could attack from the air where most prey could not reach them even. The newest species in the academy had good rankings. The Mantari were level 5 swarm strikers because they could attack so fast that their prey had no time to escape. But when the students looked for humans on the pyramid, they found them way down at level 3. The rankings said persistence hunters, which meant they were only good at following their prey for a long time until it got tired. Most of the students thought this was a very boring way to hunt. Dong-wook sat quietly in his corner listening to everything, but he did not look upset or embarrassed like the other students expected. Instead, he looked curious, like he was thinking about something important. The Professor continued talking about the different levels and how scientists had studied thousands of species to create the rankings. He explained that the rankings were based on how good a species was at finding prey, catching prey, and surviving in dangerous situations. Every species in this room has earned their place in the rankings. Through millions of years of evolution, Professor Vextar said proudly, the strongest and smartest predators rise to the top, while the weak ones stay at the bottom or disappear completely. Some of the students nodded and made sounds of agreement. They were proud of their high rankings and felt sorry for the humans who were ranked so low. The professor was about to continue with his lesson when a hand went up in the back of the room. It was Dongwook, and he looked like he had something to say. The entire class turned to look at him. Some students whispered to each other, wondering what the weak human could possibly want to ask about. The Canary students showed their teeth in what might have been smiles, and the Screeth ruffled their feathers with amusement. Professor Vextar looked surprised that a human would interrupt his lesson. His scales started to change from their normal green color to a slightly annoyed yellow color. What is it, human? He said in a voice that showed he did not really want to be interrupted. Dongwook stood up slowly. He was not very tall compared to the other students, but something about the way he stood made him seem bigger than he really was. His dark eyes were calm and serious as he looked at the professor. I have a question about the rankings, he said in a clear voice that everyone could hear. The professor's scales flickered between yellow and orange, showing that he was becoming more annoyed. What kind of question could you possibly have about predator rankings, human? Dongwook looked at the glowing pyramid floating in the air, then back at the professor. His expression was curious, but there was something else in his eyes, something that made a few of the smarter students pay closer attention. Where do tigers fit in this system? He asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge that no one understood. Most of the students had never heard of tigers before, and they looked confused. Some of them whispered to each other, asking if anyone knew what a tiger was. Professor Vextar's scales went through several color changes as he tried to figure out how to answer the question. He had never heard of tigers either, and he did not like admitting that he did not know something in front of his students. The classroom became very quiet as everyone waited for the professor's answer. Even the air recycling system seemed to make less noise than usual. The holographic pyramid continued to glow, but now it seemed like it might be missing something important. Tigers, the professor finally said, trying to sound like he knew what he was talking about. You mean some creature from your primitive homeworld? If it is not in our database, then it is clearly not significant enough to rank A. Few students started to laugh, thinking that the human was just trying to make his weak species sound more important, but Dongwook did not look embarrassed or angry. Instead, he smiled, a small smile that somehow made the laughing students feel less sure of themselves. The professor noticed that his answer had not made Dongwook back down, and his scales shifted to a more uncertain color. He was starting to realize that maybe this human knew something that he did not. With respect, Professor Dongwook said in a polite voice that still carried a hint of steel underneath, I think you might want to reconsider that assessment. Professor Vextar's scales flickered through many colors before settling on a bright orange that meant he was feeling dismissive. Tigers, he said with a snort. You mean some creature from your primitive homeworld? If it is not in our database, it is clearly not significant enough to rank. Several students started to laugh and make jokes about the human and his strange question. Kuru, the Canary Pack leader, showed her sharp teeth in what was definitely not a friendly smile. A few seats away from Dongwook sat another human student named Kang Min Ho. He was the only other human in the entire academy, and he looked worried about where this conversation was going. He caught Dongwook's eye and shook his head slightly, trying to tell him to drop the subject, but Dongwook was already standing up. His posture was straight and confident, even though he was surrounded by creatures that could tear him apart with their bare hands. With respect, Professor, I think you might want to reconsider that assessment, Dongwook said calmly. Tigers are apex predators on Earth. They hunt alone and can take down prey 3 times their own size, and they have been known to hunt humans. The laughter in the room got louder. Koru slapped her knee with her clawed hand. Hunt humans, she said between laughs, but humans are level 3 at best. What kind of pathetic predator would that make your tigers more? Students joined in the laughter. The Screeth flapped their wings and made screeching sounds that was how they laughed. The Mentari clicked their mandibles together in amusement. Professor Vextar's scales had turned to a purple color that meant he was feeling amused and superior. "Very well, human," he said in a tone that suggested he was about to teach the uppity human a lesson. "Since you seem so confident about these tigers, why don't you show us what makes them so special?" The professor gestured toward the door that led to the Academy's training chambers. "We have holographic training rooms that can simulate any hunting scenario. You can demonstrate what makes these tigers so impressive." The class erupted in excited chatter. Practical demonstrations were always more fun than sitting in a classroom listening to lectures, and most of the students were looking forward to seeing the weak human get embarrassed. Within minutes, the entire class had moved to the Academy's main training chamber. It was a massive dome-shaped room that could create any environment using advanced holographic technology. The walls, floor, and ceiling could become anything from a desert to an ocean to the vacuum of space. Professor Vextar walked to the control panel and began programming the system to create a jungle environment based on the files they had about Earth. The computer quickly built a dense tropical forest complete with thick trees, hanging vines, and the sounds of strange birds. The air in the chamber became warm and humid, just like a real jungle. Small insects buzzed around, and the smell of rich earth and growing plants filled the room. It was so realistic that some students forgot they were still inside a spaceship now. Then Professor Vextar announced to the class, "You will play the role of your precious tiger, hunt and take down a simulated target. Let's see how well a level 3 species predator actually performs." The students gathered on an observation deck that overlooked the training chamber. They pressed against the transparent walls, eager to see what would happen. Dong-wook stood alone in the center of the artificial jungle, looking small and fragile compared to the massive predators watching him. The holographic system created a deer in the jungle about 50 meters away from Dong-wook. The deer was peacefully eating grass and had no idea that a predator was nearby. Begin simulation, Professor Vextar commanded. What happened next made every student in the observation deck fall silent. Dong-wook dropped into a low crouch, and something fundamental changed about him. It was like watching a completely different person take over his body. His movements became smooth and flowing like water. His eyes became focused and alert in a way that made several students step back from the windows. The watching aliens had expected to see a clumsy human stumbling through the jungle, making noise and scaring away the prey. Instead, they saw something that moved through the forest like it was born there. Dong-wook began to stalk through the jungle with impossible grace. Every step was placed perfectly to avoid making any sound. He used the shadows between the trees like they were a second skin. His breathing was so quiet that the sensitive hearing of the canary could not detect it. "This is impossible," whispered Senna, the Screef student. Her feathers were standing up straight, which happened when she was frightened. "No ground predator moves like that." The other students watched in growing amazement as Dong-wook demonstrated hunting skills that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. He was not just copying what he had seen tigers do. He was becoming something else entirely, something that spoke to millions of years of evolution. For 20 minutes, Dong-wook moved through the simulated jungle like a living shadow. He studied the deer from every angle, learning its habits and finding the perfect position for an attack. The deer never knew it was being watched. When Dong-wook finally decided to attack, the movement was so sudden and explosive that several students actually jumped back from the observation windows. One moment he was hidden in the shadows 50 meters away. The next moment he was flying through the air with his hands extended toward the deer's neck. The holographic deer never had a chance to react. Dong-wook landed on its back with perfect precision, and his virtual teeth found the deer's throat exactly where a real predator would bite to kill quickly and efficiently. The simulation ended with a soft chime, and the jungle environment faded away, leaving Dong-wook standing alone in the empty chamber. The observation deck was completely silent. Nobody moved or spoke. They all stared at the human who had just demonstrated hunting skills that seemed impossible for his species. Professor Vextar's scales had turned to a color that none of the students had ever seen before. A deep, uncertain gray that meant he was confused and maybe a little afraid. "Run the analysis," he commanded in a tight voice. The computer's holographic display showed the results of Dong-wook's hunt stalking efficiency. 94%, strike accuracy, 98%. Prey neutralization time, 3.2 seconds, energy expenditure minimal. These numbers Senna breathed her. Voice barely a whisper, they are almost at level 8 efficiency, but Dong-wook was not finished. As he stood up from his crouch, he looked directly at the observation deck. His eyes held a weight that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. That was just one tiger hunting alone, he said calmly, but, Professor, you need to understand something important about Earth's predators. Tigers are not even the apex predator on our planet. The students looked at each other with growing confusion and worry. Koru snarled, showing her fangs. Impossible, she said. Nothing could be more efficient than what we just saw, but there is. Dong-wook replied. His smile carried a weight that made every predator in the room feel like prey for the first time in their lives. The apex predator on Earth is the species that hunted tigers to near extinction. The species that turned the most perfect killing machines our planet ever produced into an endangered species. The observation deck erupted in chaos. Students from every species began shouting at once. Impossible, and level 3 species cannot hunt level 8 predators filled the air, along with growls, screeches, and clicking sounds from the different alien languages. Professor Vextar raised one of his massive clawed hands, and the noise slowly died down. His scales were cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the first hints of something that might have been real. Fear. You are claiming, he said slowly, that humans, primitive, weapon-dependent humans, actually hunted these perfect predators. Not just hunted, Dong-wook said quietly. We turned them into decorations. We wore their skins, hung their heads on our walls, and ground up their bones to make medicine. We did not just compete with tigers for territory. We won so completely that we had to create special parks just to keep them from disappearing forever. The room fell silent again, except for the quiet humming of the ship's systems. Every student, regardless of what species they came from, found themselves looking at the two humans with completely new eyes. Min Ho stepped closer to Dong-wook and nodded grimly. It was not just tigers, he added. Humans have hunted woolly mammoths, cave bears, dire wolves, giant ground sloths, and dozens of other apex predators. Most of them do not exist anymore. Karu, the Canary pack leader, bared all her fangs. This is ridiculous, she snarled. Your species barely has claws, no natural armor, and you are slower than any real predator. How could you possibly defeat creatures like that? Because we do not hunt like you, Dong-wook interrupted. We do not rely on strength, speed, and natural weapons. We hunt with intelligence, cooperation, and tools, but more than that, we hunt with something that no other species on Earth could match. He activated his personal data pad and projected images into the air for everyone to see. The holographic pictures showed humans in different time periods using various hunting methods. Every other predator on Earth gives up if the prey escapes the first attack, Dong-wook explained, but humans, we follow our prey for days, weeks, even months if we have to. We track them across entire continents. We study their behavior, learn their weak points, and change our strategies until they have nowhere left to run. The images showed persistence hunting scenes that made the alien students gasp in amazement. Humans running across African plains for hours chasing antelope until the much faster animals collapsed from exhaustion. Other pictures showed coordinated group hunts where hundreds of humans worked together to drive entire herds of massive animals off cliffs. There were images of humans using fire as a weapon, burning entire forests to flush out prey. Images of humans following wounded animals for weeks, tracking them by tiny drops of blood. Images of humans setting traps that could catch creatures 10 times their size. Your tiger, Senna whispered, her voice shaking. In the simulation you moved like one, but you were thinking like something completely different. That is exactly right, Minho said, nodding. That is because humans are not just persistence predators, we are adaptive predators. We do not just copy other hunting styles, we absorb them, improve them, and then use them against the creatures that created them. More images appeared showing humans using techniques borrowed from every type of predator on Earth. Humans climbing trees, like cats stalking prey, like wolves swimming underwater, like crocodiles, and even using echolocation like bats. Every predator technique you have studied in this academy, humans have either developed on their own or learned by watching other species. Dong-wook continued, and once we learn a technique, we teach it to other humans, so the knowledge spreads to our entire species. Professor Vextar's scales had settled into a deep, worried purple. If this is true, then our entire classification system is fundamentally wrong. Humans are not level 3 persistence. Hunters, they are something else entirely, something we have never seen before. Run a full analysis, Dong-wook suggested calmly, not just on human hunting efficiency, but on human impact on other predator species throughout our history. The Academy's main computer began working on the request. Within minutes, holographic displays filled the observation deck with data from Earth. The statistics were so extreme that several students thought there must be an error. 96% of large predator species had gone extinct since humans developed advanced hunting techniques. The few that survived lived only in protected areas or places too remote and dangerous for human settlement. These numbers cannot be right, Koru protested, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence. No single species could have this kind of impact on an entire planet. Cross reference the data with human population growth and territorial expansion. Professor Vexstar commanded. His professional curiosity was starting to overcome his discomfort. The new data painted an even more disturbing picture. In less than 50,000 years, humans had spread from one continent to every piece of land on Earth. They had learned to survive in every environment, from frozen ice caps to burning deserts to dense jungles. And everywhere they went, the big predators vanished. The computer continued analyzing and cross-referencing data from Earth's history. It showed how humans had systematically eliminated competition from other predator species, not through single battles, but through long-term campaigns that lasted generations. Level 9, the computer announced in its calm, neutral voice. Classification: extinction predators. Humans demonstrate the ability to systematically eliminate competing predator species through coordinated hunting, environmental manipulation, adaptive tool use, and intergenerational knowledge transfer. The observation deck fell completely silent. Level 9 was a theoretical classification that existed only in academic papers about hypothetical super predators. No known species had ever been ranked that high, but the computer was not finished. Analysis indicates that human hunting success rate approaches 100% when sufficient time and resources are allocated to the task. No known predator species has successfully resisted human hunting pressure over extended periods. Several students made choking or gasping sounds. The implications were staggering. If humans were truly level 9 extinction predators, then every other predator species in the galaxy might be in danger. Professor Vexstar stared at the data displays for a long moment. His scales had turned to colors that cycled between fear, respect, and something that might have been all we need to inform the Academy Board immediately, he said quietly. This changes everything we thought we knew about predator hierarchies and galactic security. As the students filed out of the observation deck in shocked silence, many of them kept glancing back at Dong-wook and Min-ho. The two humans stood calmly discussing something in quiet voices, seeming completely unaware of the chaos they had just created. But Senna, the Screeth student, noticed something that made her feathers stand on end. The humans were not discussing what had just happened. They were analyzing the reactions of the other students, studying how each species had responded to the revelation. Even now, they were still hunting, still learning, still gathering information that might be useful later. The days that followed were unlike anything in the Academy's long history. News of the human classification spread through the student body like wildfire, starting in whispered conversations and growing into heated debates that filled every common area and study. Wholesome species demanded that the results be independently verified by scientists from their homeworlds. Others suggested that humans should be removed from the Academy, entirely arguing that extinction predators were too dangerous to train alongside other species. The Kanari students formed hunting packs and patrolled the corridors, keeping watch on the humans. The Screeth took to perching in high places where they could observe everything from above. The Mantari clustered together in groups, communicating through their scent language about potential threats, but the humans continued their daily routines as if nothing had changed. They attended classes, ate meals in the cafeteria, and studied in the library. They were polite and friendly with other students who were willing to talk to them. This calm behavior somehow made the other students even more nervous. A species that had just been classified as galactic-level predators should be proud or aggressive or at least excited. Instead, the humans acted like the revelation was no big Deal Professor Vexstar found himself in the uncomfortable position of defending his initial assessment while trying to understand what the new classification meant for galactic civilization. He had sent urgent messages to the Academy Board but had not yet received a response finally. After 3 days of chaos, the board agreed to conduct a comprehensive field test. If humans truly were level 9 extinction predators, then the galaxy needed to understand exactly what that meant. We will test human hunting capabilities against various species in controlled environments. Professor Vexstar announced to a packed auditorium the tests will be fair and safe, but they will push the humans to demonstrate their true abilities. The first test was scheduled for the next day. Dong-wook would face 3 of the Academy's best Montari students in a capture the flag scenario. The environment would be a complex urban setting with tall buildings, underground tunnels, and multiple levels. The Montari students were confident. Their species was known for lightning-fast reflexes and perfect coordination through pheromone communication. They had never lost a capture the flag exercise against any other species. The test arena was a holographic recreation of a major galactic city, complete with skyscrapers, transit systems, and millions of simulated civilians. The 3 Montari students, Krixvel and Zara, were some of the finest hunters their species had ever produced. They moved through the urban environment like living quicksilver. Their forearms allowed them to climb walls and navigate vertical spaces with impossible grace. They could communicate instantly and silently, coordinating their search patterns with perfect efficiency, but Dong-wook did not try to match their speed or climb the buildings. Instead, he simply vanished into the urban landscape using maintenance tunnels, service corridors, and hidden passages that the Montari had not even noticed existed. The watching students followed the action on holographic displays. The Montari moved in perfect formation, searching every obvious hiding place and covering all the major routes through the city. They should have found their target within minutes, but minutes turned into an hour and the Montari were still searching. Dong-wook seemed to have disappeared completely until he suddenly appeared behind Zara, eliminating her with a non-lethal capture device before vanishing again. The 2 remaining Montari immediately adapted their search pattern, but it was too late. Dong-wook was already moving to his next target, using their own coordination against them by predicting where they would search. Next Krixvel, next caught in a corridor he thought was secure. Vel, the last Montari, found himself alone in a maze of buildings, hunting a predator he could not see, hear, or track. Time elapsed 14 minutes. Human victory, the computer announced. The second test was scheduled for 2 days later. Minho would face a full pack of Canary students in a wilderness survival scenario. The Canary were supremely confident. Pack hunting was their specialty, and they had chosen a forest environment similar to their homeworld. The pack consisted of 5 of the Academy's most skilled Canary hunters, led by Koru herself. They knew every trick of pack coordination and had never been defeated by a single opponent. The test began with Minho alone in the center of a vast forest. The Canary pack spread out in a classic hunting formation designed to drive prey toward the center, where Koru waited for the killing blow. But Minho did not run or hide. Instead, he spent the first hour simply observing, learning the pack's movement patterns, their communication signals, and their individual hunting styles. Then he began what human military experts called psychological warfare. Using sound mimicry, he created false Volf calls that confused the pack's coordination. He left misleading tracks that sent individual pack members in wrong directions. He even used the forest itself as a weapon, causing rock slides and fallen trees that separated the pack members. The Canary found themselves chasing shadows and false trails. Their perfect coordination began to break down as they lost contact with each other in the dense forest. One by one, Minho eliminated the pack members, using non-lethal methods that left them unconscious and unable to warn the others. Each elimination was perfectly timed to avoid detection by the remaining hunters. By the time Karu realized what was happening, she was alone in the forest being hunted by a predator. She could not see, hear, or understand. Impossible, she whispered into her communicator before Minho appeared behind her. Humans do not have enhanced senses. How could you track us so perfectly? Answer came from Professor Vexstar, who was studying the human techniques with growing amazement. He was not tracking you with enhanced senses. He was predicting your behavior based on psychological analysis. He knew where you would go because he understood how you think. Time elapsed. 37 minutes. Human victory. The final test was the most ambitious, yet both humans would work together to ground a Screeth hunter in a canyon environment. The Screeth student, Senna, was confident that her aerial superiority would make her impossible to catch. Senna launched herself into the air immediately, using her powerful wings to soar high above the canyon floor. She could see everything from her aerial position, and her razor-sharp talons could strike from any angle. But Dongwook and Minho demonstrated something that no other species in the academy had shown: seamless cooperation between individuals who were not related or part of a natural pack structure. They had spent hours studying Senna's flight patterns and had developed a strategy specifically designed to counter her aerial advantages. Using reflected sunlight-thrown objects and coordinated positioning, they began to create a three-dimensional trap in the canyon. Every time Senna tried to escape in one direction, she found one of the humans positioned to block her path with obstacles or distractions. They were not trying to catch her directly. Instead, they were controlling her flight pattern, forcing her into an increasingly narrow corridor of safe airspace. The watching students were amazed by the level of coordination between the two humans. They moved like they shared one mind, anticipating each other's actions and working together with perfect timing. After 25 minutes of constant maneuvering, Senna was exhausted. Her wings were tired from fighting the updrafts and crosswinds that the humans had created with their strategic positioning. When she finally had to land to rest, both humans were waiting with capture nets. They had predicted exactly where she would be forced to touch down. Time elapsed. 28 minutes. Human victory. The test results were sent immediately to the Galactic Council. The implications were clear. Humans had not just defeated other predator species. They had done so using intelligence and cooperation in ways that no other species had ever demonstrated. The emergency session of the Academy Board lasted for 3 straight days. Representatives from dozens of species arrived on fast ships to witness the discussions. The question of human classification had become the most important issue in galactic politics. Admiral Kethra, a massive crab-like being who commanded the Academy's Oversight Committee, clicked her huge claws nervously as she reviewed the test data. Are we looking at potential allies or the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced? The data was undeniable. Humans had systematically outperformed every other predator species, not through superior physical capabilities, but through something much more dangerous. They could adapt, learn, and cooperate in ways that made them nearly unstoppable. Professor Vextar stood before the assembled board members, his scales shifting through worried colors as he explained his findings. They do not hunt like any other species we have studied, he said. They do not rely on instinct or natural abilities. Instead, they study their targets, learn their weaknesses, and develop specific strategies for each situation. But more troubling than their individual abilities was their capacity for cooperation. The tests had shown that humans could work together seamlessly, sharing knowledge and coordinating actions across groups that had no family or pack bonds. Dr. Zalara, a renowned xenobiologist who had arrived from the core world, stood up to present her analysis. She was an elderly creature with 6 arms and compound eyes that could see in multiple spectrums. I have spent the last week studying human social structures and historical records, she announced. The results are unlike anything we have seen in known galactic civilization. Her presentation filled the chamber with holographic displays showing human development over thousands of years. The images showed how humans had spread across their planet, adapting to every environment and eliminating competition wherever they went. They do not just hunt as individuals or small groups, Dr. Zalara explained. They can coordinate hunting activities across their entire species. When humans identify a target for elimination, they bring the resources of their entire civilization to bear on the problem. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The implications were staggering. A species that could coordinate planetary-level hunting campaigns was something entirely new in galactic history, but the most disturbing discovery came when Dr. Zalara analyzed human technological development. Unlike other species that develop tools for survival or convenience, humans had consistently developed technology specifically for hunting and warfare. Every major advancement in human technology can be traced back to hunting or military applications. She said their space program began as a weapons delivery system. The computers were designed to calculate ballistic trajectories. Their medical technology was developed. To keep warriors alive longer, the presentation continued with examples of human innovation that had been driven by the need to hunt more effectively. Fire, agriculture, metalworking, chemistry, and even mathematics had all been developed or improved to make humans more efficient predators. Admiral Kethra's claws clicked against the metal table. "What are you saying, Dr. Zalara?" "That humans are a species designed for warfare, not designed." Dr. Zalara replied, "Carefully evolved. Every aspect of human development has been shaped by millions of years of competition with other predators. They are not just hunters, they are meta-predators. Species that specialize in hunting other predators." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If humans were meta-predators, then every other predator species in the galaxy was potentially at risk. Professor Vextar activated another display showing the results of psychological testing that had been conducted on human students. "We also discovered something else about human hunting behavior," he said. "They do not just eliminate competing predator species, they study them first." The display showed how humans had observed and learned from every predator species they had encountered on Earth before. Eliminating cave bears, they had learned to use caves for shelter. Before hunting wolves, they had learned pack coordination techniques. Before eliminating large cats, they had learned stealth and ambush tactics. They absorbed the hunting techniques of other species and then used those techniques against the original creators. Professor Vextar explained, "This makes them incredibly adaptable and nearly impossible to defend against." Board member Crickstal, an insectoid creature from the hive worlds, raised a concern. "What about their current behavior? Since arriving at the academy, the humans have been peaceful and cooperative. They have made no aggressive moves toward other species." Dr. Zalara nodded. "That is consistent with human hunting patterns. They do not attack immediately, instead they observe and learn. They integrate themselves into the target population and study weaknesses before making their move." The observation sent a chill through the chamber. Were the humans at the academy studying the other species as potential targets? Admiral Kethra called for a recess so the board could discuss their options privately. When they reconvened several hours later, the tension in the room was obvious. "We have three choices," Admiral Kethra announced. "We can classify humans as a galactic threat and recommend military action. We can quarantine them to their home system. Or we can attempt to integrate them into galactic civilization under careful supervision." The debate that followed was heated. Some board members argued that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to spread throughout the galaxy. Others pointed out that humans had shown no hostile intentions and had been cooperative in all their dealings with other species. Finally, Professor Vextar proposed a radical solution. "What if we invite them to become instructors at the academy?" The suggestion was met with shocked silence. Admiral Kethra's claws stopped clicking. "You want to put extinction predators in charge of training other predator species? Think about it," Professor Vextar said, his scales shifting to determined blue. "If humans are truly the ultimate predators, then who better to teach other species how to survive? Who better to help other predator species adapt and improve?" The logic was sound but terrifying. If humans were apex predators, then learning from them might be the only way for other species to survive. But it would also mean acknowledging human superiority and potentially giving them access to the weaknesses of every species in the galaxy. Dr. Zalara spoke up. "I believe Professor Vextar may be correct. Human behavior suggests that they are not interested in exterminating other species unless those species pose a direct threat. Instead, they prefer to dominate and control." The board voted on the proposal. It passed by a narrow margin. The humans would be offered positions as instructors, but under strict supervision and with careful monitoring of their activities. When the decision was announced to the academy, the reaction was mixed. Some students were excited about the opportunity to learn from the galaxy's most effective predators. Others were terrified at the thought of being taught by creatures that could potentially hunt them. Dongwook and Min Ho accepted the positions with the same calm demeanor they had shown throughout the entire process. They seemed unsurprised by the offer, as if they had been expecting it all along. The academy's motto was changed to reflect the new reality: hunt with honor, kill with precision, survive with wisdom. Because in a galaxy where humans had arrived, survival itself had become an art form that every species needed to master, the first human-led classes were scheduled to begin. The following week, students from across the galaxy signed up despite their fears. They knew that learning from extinction predators might be dangerous, but not learning from them would be even more dangerous, as Professor Dongwook prepared his first lesson plan. He smiled to himself. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had known for thousands of years. The most dangerous predator is not the one with the sharpest claws or the strongest bite. It is the one that makes you forget you are being hunted until it is too late. 3 months had passed since the humans had been appointed as instructors at the Galactic Predator Academy. The changes were remarkable and terrifying. Students who had once been confident in their hunting abilities now questioned everything they thought they knew about predation. Professor Dongwook stood at the front of a packed classroom. His students included representatives from every major predator species in the galaxy. All of them had specifically requested to take his course despite the risk. Today we will discuss the most important concept in hunting. He began, his voice calm and steady, the concept that separates successful predators from extinct ones. The students leaned forward eagerly. They had learned that human lessons were unlike anything else taught at the academy. Instead of focusing on physical techniques or natural abilities, the humans taught strategy, psychology, and adaptation. The most dangerous opponent is not the one who is strongest or fastest, Dongwook continued. It is the one who learns from every encounter, who adapts their strategy based on new information, who never makes the same mistake twice. He activated a holographic display showing various hunting scenarios from across the galaxy. The images showed predators from dozens of different worlds, each using their natural abilities in traditional ways. These hunting methods work well against prey that behaves predictably, Dongwook explained. But what happens when the prey learns to anticipate your attacks? What happens when the prey starts hunting you back? The question sent a chill through the classroom. Most predator species had never considered the possibility that their prey might evolve to fight. Backman Ho, who was team teaching the class, stepped forward to continue the lesson on Earth. Humans faced this exact situation. We were not the strongest or fastest predators, but we faced creatures that we had to learn to think differently. The display changed to show human hunting techniques that had been developed specifically to counter other predators' methods for tracking creatures that left no obvious trails. Techniques for setting traps that even intelligent prey could not detect. Strategies for hunting in groups that could overwhelm any individual predator. The key insight, Min Ho explained, is that successful predation is not about using your natural abilities. It is about understanding your target so completely that you can predict their behavior before they know what they are going to do themselves. A Canary student named Brock raised his hand. Professor, how do humans study their targets so effectively? Our pack hunting methods have worked for millions of years. Why would we need to change them? Dongwook smiled, the expression that had learned to make other species nervous. Because your targets are learning too, he said. Every species in this galaxy has been exposed to new ideas, new technologies, new ways of thinking. Your traditional hunting methods work against traditional prey, but what about prey that has adapted? The classroom fell silent as the implications sank and the galaxy was changing. Species that had never interacted before were now in contact. Trade routes brought new technologies and new ideas to every world. Traditional predator-prey relationships were being disrupted too. Demonstrate his point. Dongwook called up a holographic simulation of a typical Canary pack hunt. The display showed 5 Canary hunters using their traditional formation to take down a large herbivore. Now watch what happens when the prey has learned to anticipate your tactics, he said. The simulation restarted, but this time the prey animals had been programmed with knowledge of Canary hunting patterns. The herbivores recognized the pack formation and scattered in directions that broke up the coordination. The hunt failed completely. This is what is happening across the galaxy. Dongwook explained, species that were once easy prey are learning to defend themselves. Some are even learning to hunt their former predators. The students shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had heard reports from their homeworlds about prey species that had become more aggressive and harder to hunt. A Screeth student named Kara spoke up. What? You are describing sounds like warfare, not hunting. Dong Wook nodded. That is exactly right, he said. The line between hunting and warfare is artificial. All successful predation is warfare. You are trying to defeat an opponent who does not want to be defeated. The class spent the rest of the session learning about concepts that had never been taught in predator education before: strategic thinking, game theory, psychological manipulation, and adaptive tactics. But the most important lesson was about cooperation. Min Ho demonstrated how humans could coordinate complex operations between individuals who had never worked together before. The key was communication and shared understanding of goals. Unlike pack species that rely on family bonds or hive minds that share consciousness, humans have learned to cooperate with anyone who shares their objectives. This gives them incredible flexibility in forming hunting groups. The students were amazed by exercises that showed how two humans could coordinate perfectly even when they could not see or hear each other. They used hand signals, body language, and even environmental cues to share information. By the end of the class, many students were questioning everything they thought they knew about hunting. Some were excited by the new possibilities they were learning. Others were deeply troubled by the implications. After the students left, Dong Wook and Min Ho remained in the classroom, reviewing the day's lessons. They had been carefully monitoring the reactions of different species to human teaching methods. The Canary are adapting quickly, Min Ho observed. They understand pack tactics, so cooperation comes naturally to them. The Screeth are having more difficulty because they are used to hunting alone. Dong Wook nodded. The Mantari are the most interesting case, he said. They have the intelligence to understand the concepts, but their hive mind structure makes individual adaptation difficult. What they did not discuss was the real purpose of their teaching. The humans were not just sharing knowledge, they were observing how different species learned and adapted. They were identifying strengths and weaknesses in every major predator species in the galaxy. The information was being carefully recorded and analyzed. Human observers throughout the galaxy were building detailed profiles of every species they encountered, understanding their psychology, their biology, their technology, and their potential as either allies or threats. Within a year, human instructors had been placed at academies throughout the galaxy. They were welcomed as teachers and advisors, but they were also conducting the most comprehensive intelligence gathering operation in galactic history. The other species saw only the beneficial aspects of human teaching. Their students were becoming more effective hunters. Their military forces were learning new tactics. Their civilizations were adapting to the changing galactic environment. But a few perceptive individuals began to notice patterns. Dr. Zilara Part 1, the Galactic Academy. The huge metal building floated in space like a giant crystal floating in black water. The Galactic Predator Academy was the most famous school in the entire galaxy, where young creatures from hundreds of different worlds came to learn how to hunt and survive. The building was so big that it had its own gravity and air inside, making it feel like being on a real planet inside. The main classroom, Professor Vexstar, stood tall and scary in front of his students. He was a giant lizard creature with green scales that changed colors when he felt different emotions. His yellow eyes looked like they could see right through anyone, and his sharp teeth were longer than a human's fingers. When he was happy, his scales turned bright blue, but when he was angry, they turned deep red. The classroom was full of young predators from all over the galaxy. In the front row sat 3 Wolf-like creatures called Canary. They had thick fur and sharp claws, and they always sat together because they were pack hunters. Their leader was a female named Karu, who had scars on her face from many battles. She was proud and strong and never backed down from a fight. Behind the Canary sat the bird creatures called Screeth. They had beautiful feathers that sparkled in the light and wings that could carry them faster than any spaceship. Their eyes were sharp and they could see tiny movements from very far away. One of them, named Senna, kept turning her head from side to side, watching everything in the room. Near the back were the insect creatures called Mantari. They looked like giant praying mantises, but they were smart and could think just like humans. Their forearms moved so fast that sometimes other students could not even see them move. They talked to each other by making special smells that only they could understand. But in the very back corner sat someone who looked very different from everyone else. Lee Dong-wook was a human, and he was the only one of his kind in the entire school. He had black hair and dark eyes, and he was much smaller than most of the other students. His skin was soft, and he had no claws or fangs or special powers that the other students could see. Humans had only been discovered 5 years ago when galactic explorers found Earth, a small blue planet in a quiet part of space. Most people in the galaxy thought humans were weak and not very good at hunting. They had been given a level 3 ranking, which meant they were considered basic predators who could only hunt by never giving up. Professor Vextar walked to the front of the class and pressed a button on his desk. A huge holographic picture appeared in the air showing a pyramid with different levels. The pyramid glowed with blue light and had words written in the common galactic